So anxiety. Let's
Anxiety.
talk about that.
So
Keep going.
our kid is anxious about a test.
Right. Okay.
How did you help her through that last night?
Okay. So first, let's just talk about what anxiety is so we have an understanding of what's happening. So it's basically like a nervousness or unease about a fear of the future.
Okay.
Right. So that's really what's going on when someone says I'm anxious. It's like they're uneasy about something coming up. So I found this really interesting. Like, we all know that our brain is set up for immediate threat. Like, we're neurobiologically hardwired to make sure that we are not threatened. We know where to go if we need to get food or water or whatever it may be, and we know where to not go because we could be hurt, right? So our brains are made up. They were created and we have evolved to have like hardwiring for immediate threat. And so this is really interesting. What happens and where we are in our evolution is we are still this feeling of survival. It's like a fear, right? We're afraid. And so that's fear. That's what keeps us safe. But then we have also evolved where we can plan for our futures. Okay. We've been planning for our futures. We need to put money away. We need to do this. We need to do that. We need to set goals. So our planning mechanism in our brain has also been super heightened. And anxiety is the mixture of the two. These two parts of our brain, the fear and the planning, kind of like crossing swords.
Yeah.
And because we're trying to survive and we've had experiences like do this, don't do that, or this was hard, this wasn't hard. And then we start planning. And then these survival things come in like, ooh, I'm planning to take this test. But last time I took a test, I didn't do well. And it was really hard to study for it. And then I was so embarrassed and I was disappointed and all these things. And so we start to like, the wires start to cross and we get super anxious about what's coming up.
So let me see if I can get this straight.
Yeah.
If you're honestly feeling fear, fear happens in the present moment because there is a threat out there in front of me.
It happens in the present moment, but we also store it away in our brain, of course, because like, for example, let's go back to our ancestors. If they went to a certain area to forage for food, and then what they found there was a lot of wild animals who were going to kill them, they will store, I'm not going to go back there for food.
Okay.
That's not the right place.
So fear is not always just present moment. Because what I was trying to discern between fear is when you feel threatened. Anxiety is when there's a future threat out there.
Anxiety is when our planning mechanism takes over and we start to worry. We now know all these things that could happen. So we're like looking at the future, like, okay, I need to plan out next Friday or next Saturday. So I need to look ahead. And all of a sudden that other aspect of our brain, like the fear part or the experiences we've had, or maybe haven't had yet and are trying to avoid, come into play.
So let's break this down.
Sure.
She's like, I'm scared about this test on Friday. What is the first thing you did when she came to you?
I said, of course.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about anxiety, you guys. It's not some people are anxious, some people aren't. We all experience anxiety. The level of anxiety and how we feel it is different, meaning so it's a continuum like everything. Some people feel pretty extreme anxiety all the time. I would say between you and I tend to have higher levels of anxiety than you. I think that has to do with being a highly sensitive person. I think I'm more attuned to certain things that could happen or may not happen. I think that there are parts of that because of our gender. I think there's experiences I've had that you haven't had. And I do know that there are certain things in your life that you are highly anxious about. So it's not about I'm anxious, Todd's not. It's about I tend to have more of that disposition than you do.
So you said the first thing you did was you said, of course. Actually, what you did before that was you listened.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
You did your best to listen without judgment.
Yes.
You tried not to interrupt her. You really kind of let her say her thing.
Who doesn't get nervous about a test?
Right.
You know, if we're talking about, and this is Todd's using test, we're making that up. Who doesn't get nervous about whatever's coming up in their lives? A doctor's appointment, a test that they have to take, having to meet new people. Like, you know, my daughter who's traveling, she every week has to sit with another student it's an Italian student who is learning English, and JC is an American student learning Italian, and they have to sit and talk. And she gets so nervous about it because she wants to do well.
Yeah.
So everything can make us nervous.
So, and then I might be like missing some steps here, but one of the things you said to her is like, if it wasn't the test, it's going to attach itself to something else.
Correct.
And she started talking about some other things that she was worried about a year ago.
Right.
So I wonder if you can expand on that.
Sure. The way I have worked with my own anxiety, because obviously the things I'm sharing with her are things I've had to work through myself, is anxiety tends to end up being an energy in our body. And you can kind of see it like a gremlin, or we can have things that are a little less, like gremlin may sound negative to people. Bill Hader used monkey analogy, and we'll get to that, but give me something kind of sweet that I can use. Our anxiety is like a
manchichi.
Okay. What's a manchichi?
Manchichi, manchichi. Oh, so soft and cuddly. Da, 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 da,
I know what a manchichi is. Let's just say, I'm just going to call it a gremlin because I don't want to make something up.
Wasn't there a nice gremlin? Gizmo.
Gizmo was not a gremlin yet. Gizmo was I don't know.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Okay. So this is basically, I'll just say what I told her. I said, anxiety is like
it's Monchichi, girl doll, boy doll. School time and football fan outfits are each sold separately.
Monchichi, oh, so soft and cuddly. With the thumb in your mouth, she's really fun to wiggle his little feet. La, 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 yeah, yeah.
I think we should just stick with Munchichi.
Okay, so it's a little Munchichi, and it kind of travels around because it's just part of you. It lives in you, and it finds something to attach itself to. So you'll worry and worry and worry and worry. And right now, she was worried about this test, and we started talking about, if this test wasn't happening, you would still have something you were worrying about because it needs to attach itself somewhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a little more heightened than other times. Like it's not always in the same, doesn't carry the same energy all the time. Sometimes the Munchichi is just a little nervous, and sometimes it takes it to this higher level. But the bottom line is that it's not something you can you can't get rid of it.
The more you try to get rid of it, the bigger it gets.
You have to befriend it. You have to understand it. And you also have to understand the feelings that come in, because another thing that's really interesting is that anxiety can also become a habit, because as soon as we feel the nervousness in our body and that discomfort, we often go into a zone of like, oh no, now I'm going to worry. Now I'm going to have all these feelings. Now I'm going to shut down, or now I'm going to get highly anxious. And we almost have like a pattern that we follow if we are not conscious of what's happening. Yeah. If we don't notice that, oh, I'm feeling because like I was saying, it doesn't go away. You just have to learn to recognize it, honor it, because the other thing she and I talked about is stress and anxiety are often there to propel us and help us. That's what helps you study for the test. That's what helps you get up in the morning and do your things. But it gets too much. Yeah. It's like an energy that's too strong.
Comes overwhelming.
It does. And the way I'm talking about it right now is very analytical. As somebody who deals with anxiety myself, I know it's much more difficult than the way we're talking about it. The way we're talking about it is to explain what's going on. Dealing with the feeling itself necessitates other things like journaling and breathing and talking to a therapist and talking to friends and normalizing this experience so you don't feel like it's a Todd thing or a Cathy thing or what's wrong with me or why can't I control this?
Well, I want you to talk about the other thing that you told our daughter, as far as this is a tool you can, parents can do right now to help their kids. Yes. You remember what it was?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So one thing I learned a long time ago is if I'm worried about something that's coming up and I can feel that worry creeping in where I'm kind of perseverating about it, like I keep thinking about it and it's like 2 weeks away or a week away or whatever, is to demonstrate to myself that I have acknowledged that this thing is coming up. And yes, it does worry me. I put it on like a Post-it note or a piece of paper. And I have a meditation area where this makes this easy, but I have a shelf in my meditation area and I put that thing on a shelf. So like I literally write down, like I have a doctor's appointment or I have a mammogram or I have a big presentation next Thursday or whatever. And I write it down and I put it on the shelf. It's a very like metaphorical, like I'm going to put that on the shelf because there's nothing I can do about it today.
See, I think that that's brilliant. And the reason I think it's brilliant is because the idea of first taking pen to paper is huge, right? Like you're kind of like letting it out of your head and giving it somewhere else to go. And then you take that piece of paper and you actually put it on a shelf. And you could even say to yourself or to other people, oh, the test on Friday,
I got that on a shelf.
I'm not going to study for that until Wednesday. So I'm just going to go put that on the shelf until Wednesday. And then I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to study a little bit and then I'm going to put it back.
Yes.
So I think that there's something somatic, the somatic idea of actually doing something as opposed to having this dialogue in my head, which happens all the time. Like, oh, I'm just gonna set that aside. It's one thing to tell your brain to set something aside. It's another thing to write it down and to put it on a three-dimensional object and put it somewhere. I think that that's really, really good.
And I think that sometimes setting it aside, it can verge into compartmentalizing it or denying it or push it away, because sometimes it can get louder. Not for all. Some people, you're pretty good at compartmentalizing, and I know others are too, where they can really just, I'm going to put that in a different part of my brain right now. I'm not so good at that. The other part, for those of you who maybe have a more spiritual nature around this, is when I put things on the shelf, I'm also asking for support. And when I say support, sometimes that can be literal, like I'm going to talk to Todd about this or whatever. Or there's a more spiritual support. Like I would like some guidance from wherever that comes from. We all have different belief systems. So, I don't need to impose mine on you, but it's a way of acknowledging that I don't have to do this alone. Like I'm going to put this on a shelf, and any kind of support that I can get, in human form or elsewhere, I will take. And it also, I think it's just good for us. Again, it separates us from it a little bit, where we're acknowledging it's a thing that's coming up, but it isn't us. And these are just practices. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't then rear up in my head later that day. It does. But I do say to myself, oh, you put that on the shelf. You've already thought about it.
I'm going to I just asked ChatGPT to give me 10 hacks to reduce anxiety. Notice I said reduce. I'm not going to read them. I'm going to just read what it says, and then you riff off of it. All right.
Okay. I'm always leery because it's going to give you the most general stuff.
I know.
Okay.
Deep breathing.
Of course.
Mindful meditation. Hard to do that with kids. They may not be into it.
Well, and that's such a broad, that's like saying sit, like where? In a chair, in a mindful meditation. It can be obviously the practice where you actually have a meditation area with an app or, breathing, or it can just be taking a deep breath in the moment wherever you are, even at your desk. It depends.
Number 3, regular exercise, or just say, I would just say movement.
Yeah.
When I'm getting jacked up, I'll go for a run. I'll go for a walk. I'll go play basketball. I'll go play pickleball. I'll go to a yoga class. I'll go lift weights. Like, I think that is, for me, that's one of my favorite hacks.
Well, you were talking about somatic before. That is a literal, if you think about worry or anxiety being an energy, then what that means is you don't want that energy to stagnate. So you have to create more energy.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? And a lot of times movement is the way.
Next one, healthy diet.
Sure. I mean, yeah.
Number 5, adequate sleep.
Yeah. Oh,
that's a big
huge
one, right?
And I want to go back when I just said about diet. I'm totally in on eating well. It's just these buzzwords about healthy and what that means. But yes, sleep is such a big deal. Like I know people who are have insomnia, like can't stand hearing that because it's like so triggering. But I will tell you what I tell myself. I went through such a horrible time of insomnia several years ago that even if I get 2, 3, 4, as long as I can sleep for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, ideally I like 7 or 8, but just the act of laying down and relaxing your body.
Number 6, limit informational overload.
For sure.
And it says reduce exposure to distressing news or social media.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to.
That's pretty big.
I often look for solutions in social media, and it's not the best place.
Wrong place to look for solutions.
Yes.
Number 7, relaxation techniques, whatever that is. Number 8, positive self-talk.
Sure. I mean, affirmations. The thing though is it's less about feel better. And it's more about, I'm feeling anxiety and I've done this before, or I can do this.
And then I'll just do one more, social support.
Yeah.
Ask for help. Right.
Yeah.
So out of those,
they weren't awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Out of those, for me, it's movement, I sleep, and quit watching the news.
Yeah. and again, absolutes are hard for me. We have to watch the news. There's so much going on in the world and we have to pay attention.
So many different ways to stay informed.
Yeah. I hear you. So don't watch the TV is what you're saying.
I do not consume any news via television.
Neither do I, but I do read a lot, sometimes too much.
Right.
Sometimes I'm stressed about things that I can't control. Imagine that.
What else, if anything, on anxiety before we talk about Matthew Perry?
I think the last thing I want to say is the thing that I shared with my kid was, and I've shared this with them before, but I have found that sometimes I share something that I thought I shared with my kid years ago. I'll share it with him again and it means something more. And there's this great little 4-minute Bill Hader clip that he made for the Child Alliance Institute.
I'll put it in the show notes.
And basically he just talks about how he made it a few years ago, how he has experienced anxiety his whole life. That's just helpful normalization, right? I love that we talk about our mental health because, you got Bill Hader, who's an, improv expert, SNL, director, actor. And he's like, yeah, I have pretty significant anxiety. And how he learned once he was like 37, he said that he was able to make when he feels anxiety, he envisions it like a monkey that's crawling all over his head and trying to get his attention. And he just kind of like pets it and says, yeah, you're here with me. You can come with me on stage or to my director's chair or whatever, and we'll do this together. And he befriends it. And he really said that he wished he would have known that when he was younger, that he felt really alone. And it's just great advice. And there's more advice than what I just said.
Yeah, it's a 4-minute clip. I'm looking right at it. I'm not going to play it because you kind of summarized it really well. But you used it last night for our kid, didn't you?
I did. Yeah.
Like let's use these tools.
Yeah. And just because it's like there's things that it doesn't keep. See, the thing I think we believe as parents is if I do this thing, it'll keep this from happening. You can't keep things from happening. What you do is you manage things when they occur. So like Bill Hader still gets anxious. He just now has experiences where it doesn't overtake him. He doesn't necessarily have panic attacks anymore. He has a sense of, I know this feeling I'm having. I know what tools to use. I was actually watching a clip of Pete Davidson the other day, who's also on SNL, and he was saying, I have depression every single minute and day of my life, period. He said, but when I wake up, I know what to do. I get up, I take a shower, I go for a walk, I drink water. Like he can't, it's almost, for people who have, it is a medical thing. I'm not trying to differentiate it from not being medical, but for people who have like, physical conditions that they have to maintain in the morning, it's similar. You have to get up and do the things you need to do. You can't just sit in it and think that it's going to go away.
Right.
We have to have some kind of routine. And some days they work. Like I had a really bad day the other day, Todd, didn't I? And I really just needed to cry and let it all out. I didn't have the ability to use my typical tools. And so I needed a little more help. And then the next day I was fine. Like it just, we're human.